Hello, lovely people. Um, so I'm doing a sort of essential oils type class next week, collaborating with a friend around grief, and obviously, so I've been sort of preparing for that. If you want to know more information about that, I'll get in touch with the person I'm collaborating with and get her to post below. Um, but I was thinking about loss. So loss is something that I think everybody knows about if you actually start thinking about it, but it's something that's very dear to my heart from the point of view of my shamanic work, because a lot of the stuff we do around soul retrievals and power retrievals is down to having lost part of yourself or given part of yourself away or stuff like that. So obviously, having done this stuff around grief and the essential oils I used when my dad was dying, and then looking back at other times in my life when I've had sort of significant loss, um, it's been really interesting to start thinking about when do we experience that sort of emotion and what it means. So I just sort of was writing some stuff down. So for me at the moment, I think if you've watched any of my lives over the past few years, especially sort of 3 years ago, you will have seen me talking about how weird it was, my eldest son going to college, because he, up until that point, had been home educated. So he'd been with me pretty much 24/7. And suddenly he was off somewhere 3 days a week. And it was like, oh, that's really interesting. And that idea that I'm sort of losing my child, he's becoming an adult. So that sort of thing. I think there's an awareness around when somebody dies. Obviously, you grieve and there's loss. But I think maybe there's slightly less of the thoughts around like children leaving home or going through the menopause, so you can't have children anymore. But then stuff like being carefree, sort of that thing that my son who's going to university soon is beginning to think, oh, living at home, that's pretty relatively easy, and he's going to be sort of looking after himself. So that losing that sort of being carefree childhood stuff, maybe losing a bit of that sort of joy and passion for life because suddenly it becomes a bit harder. um, Even stuff like getting older and that ability to not eat anything and not put on weight, or the ability to bounce back when you've been injured, which is something that sometimes people lose along their lifetime. Loss of friendship. So that's something that I really experienced just before I started school, right back at the age of 4. I had a best friend who left before she started school. So that was sort of a big deal for me. I was quite a quiet child, so I needed my friend with me at school, and I'd already had a term without her because they did that staggered start thing. Stuff around like losing your eyesight, having to wear glasses, suddenly making you feel a bit older. The loss of a loved one, obviously, whether that's through divorce or death, or even the sort of if you have a burglary, that sort of feeling of violation around having somebody else in your house. So it just got me thinking a bit about stuff. So and I was thinking sometimes when we don't sort of think about how maybe we're reacting to those things, if there's not an awareness around the fact that loss can be something that's more subtle but can creep up on you sort of over time, and therefore if you don't have an awareness of it, you don't know that maybe you're giving away some of your energy to that feeling that you haven't actually acknowledged. So I suppose my thing was, grief is really obvious. When you lose a loved one, people expect you to be sort of upset about it and have to find a new way of living and a new way of being in the world, whether it's a loved one or a parent or a child. That's a significant loss in your life. But I was just got me thinking about maybe some of those more subtle, not quite so significant losses that can sort of creep up on you. I know that some people even struggle with the idea we're losing our sort of natural environment at quite alarming rates in the world. And I know some people really feel that at their core, and they're sort of like, you can't really talk about that because that's seen as a bit weird. So I just wanted to put out there that, have a think about if there are things that maybe you haven't been aware of, that maybe you need to acknowledge, that maybe you need to accept and sort of acclimatize to, so that you can sort of move forward with that awareness, and therefore you can let that thought go or let that feeling go, or maybe talk to somebody about it that maybe it's affecting your sleep or your eating, but because it hasn't been acknowledged, you haven't been able to properly deal with that feeling of loss and maybe moving on in life. And obviously, if you'd like to talk to me about it, you can see that it's something that interests me. Um, I use essential oils to deal with some of these emotions that come up, which has really helped me, as you know, over the death of my dad and dealing with his dying, as opposed to some of the things where I dealt with like a miscarriage when I was 19 weeks pregnant between my kids, and I wasn't using essential oils at the time, and I did struggle a lot more with sort of the awareness around what was going on for me and the acknowledging and that sort of moving forward, because I was sort of struggling to hold on to those feelings and not really knowing what to do with it. Essential oils really help with letting that go. Obviously, then I trained as a shamanic practitioner, and part of our thing is to bring back power. And if you have experienced some losses, to look at ways to bring that back for you so that you're firing on all cylinders. So that's definitely something I've noticed. The more that you lose things, it can sort of result in more of a struggling through life that actually has a sort of catch-22 situation of, if you're not firing on all cylinders, then other things can affect you more importantly. So it sort of becomes this sort of pattern catch-22. So if you want to talk about any of those things, then obviously always get in touch with me. That's why I do these lives. Share this with anybody you think it might resonate with. I'd love to know if you've got any idea of other losses. I mean, I've got a whole list here of sort of crazy things, especially, just really weird ones. When I know from people who've had cancer in the past that because people really struggle with that, they've lost friendships over one of their family having cancer. I know I lost a couple of friendships when my dad was dying because people don't want to think that that might happen to them. So even stuff like that. So yeah, if you want to know any more, just sort of get in touch. And I wrote a little something here. I just thought I'd share because I'm always sort of just writing words and stuff. So loss, sometimes intangible, that vague feeling that something isn't quite right, that you missed something or someone took something without your knowing. Loss, glaringly obvious, loved one gone, marriage over, childhood behind you, responsibilities in front. Loss, part of life, every day, another small loss of time, another notch on the bedpost, another memory added to the pile. Smile, breathe, and move on. So take care, everybody. Remember that you are amazing, fantastic, one of a kind, unique, wonderful people. And get in touch if you want any further information about anything I've said. Okay, take care. Bye.